Siege X's full release is just around the corner, and with it comes a new operator rework to Clash and a ton of changes that will mix up the meta. So in today's video, I'll be doing a new and updated Defender tier list, same as every season. The operators will be ranked in alphabetical order and timestamps will be in the description for your viewing experience. Now let's go ahead and get into the video. And the first operator we're going to be placing on the tier list is Alibi, and I'm going to be putting her in the D tier. Alibi is a pretty clear D tier operator, and that's just because the only reason why people pick her is for her guns. If she didn't have the MX4 Storm, pretty much no one would be playing her, and that's because her gadget just kind of sucks. It's really easy to tell the difference between an Alibi clone and Alibi herself because her clones don't have any idle animations, and her skins on her clones don't swap to match what she's wearing. The only exception to this is the elite skin. Also, attachments on her weapons don't match to her clones, and even the weapon she's choosing doesn't match with her clones. And so Alibi's clones very rarely catch attackers off guard, so you'll pretty much never get utility out of her gadget. And her secondary gadgets aren't great as well, so there's not really much reason to pick her, which is why I think Ubisoft needs to rework her and give her some buffs to her gadget. Now after Alibi, we have Aruni, who's going to be going in the B tier. Aruni's just really a solid pick. She has her punch, which allows her to help set up the bomb site. She has a DMR on defense, which is really good. And she also has her Aruni gates, which can burn some time off the attack and also waste some utility. She's not as good as some of the other utility blockers like Wifi and Jager, but she's still decent. Azami, on the other hand, is absolutely overpowered, and she's going to be going in S tier for pretty clear reasons. Her Kibas allow you to defend bomb sites in ways that literally any other operator wouldn't allow you to, and that's because they provide you with bulletproof cover, which can help you stay in power positions for a lot longer, and they waste utility off of the attackers that they now won't be able to use for other more important gadgets like Maestro Evil Eyes, bulletproof cameras, or deployable shields. And so Azami can be an absolute menace if you know how to play her right, and that's why she's going in the S tier. She's definitely one of the few operators on the defense right now that I think need a nerf. Bandit, on the other hand, is just the definition of an operator that's good in every round you choose him. His batteries are solid for allowing you to electrify walls and just kind of delay the attackers a little bit from getting that wall open, and if you Bandit trick with him, he can be even stronger, and he has access to an MP7, which allows him to take gunfights effectively, and he gets a nitro cell. There's literally no downsides to Bandit really, and you can't really go wrong with picking him. Kate is definitely better than Bandit, but if you just want a better gun or if you want a trick, then Bandit's your guy. Now next up is Castle, and he's going to be another operator that's just going to go in the B tier. He's a solid pick. He has a secondary shotgun that can help you set up the site. His barricades are really useful for wasting attacker utility and also funneling the attackers into other gadgets that you have set up on the bomb site. However, the downside of Castle is that he does have the UMP, which a lot of people really hate. And I also don't think he has the best secondary gadgets because he only has access to a bulletproof camera and proximity alarms. Overall, though, still a pretty solid operator as long as you have an actual setup around him. Caveira, on the other hand, is not good at all, and she's going to be going in the D tier as well. Caveira has been in need of a rework for a very long time. Her weapons suck, her gadget is not good in any rank over bronze, and she doesn't provide any utility to the team. So you're basically bringing a selfish operator with a terrible gadget and terrible guns. There's really no reason to pick Caveira, and she desperately needs a rework to her gadget to make her more useful, because having the ability to move around the map silently is not enough to justify picking an operator in rank. Following up Caveira, we have the new rework to Clash, and I think this is going to be a very controversial operator. I think some people are going to think that she's borderline overpowered, and I think some people are going to think that she's not very good. I think she's going to go in the solid pick category. The reason why I say that is because I think with the new Clash, for you to actually get utility out of her, you're going to need to bring a setup around her. If you want Clash to last a long time, bringing a Wamai and having Wamai roam near her would be smart, and also just having her play in a specific position with a lot of utility around her is going to be where she shines. However, from my experience on the test server, I think a lot of players are going to start using her way too aggressively. They're going to die a lot with her, and it's going to make her seem like she's not as good as she actually is. Clash is going to excel at holding down a power position in combination with other teammates and in combination with other utility. But if you're just going to run around the map aimlessly or jump out into spawn and try to get a spawn kill with her, I really don't think she's going to be that good, because as long as the attackers bring some form of explosive utility, they can counter her pretty easily. Now following up Clash, we have Doc, who is an operator in my opinion that has kind of fallen off recently, and that's mainly because I think Thunderbird has surpassed him in pretty much every way, and so I'm going to be putting Doc in the C tier. I think Doc can be a fun operator to fill a hole in your lineup. Like if you have 4 operators and you don't really know what your 5th operator should be because you don't really need anyone, picking a Doc isn't terrible because he does bring barbed wire, he does have a secondary shotgun, and a lot of people just like running around with his ACOG on the MP5, and his Doc stems can let you last a little bit longer if the enemy team isn't good at hitting headshots. However, Thunderbird is going to be more useful for you in 90% of scenarios. That's because she also has a secondary shotgun. However, she gets a deployable shield. She has a secondary SMG SMG if you'd prefer to bring that. Her primary weapon is better than Doc, and her Kona stations are better than Doc's stims because she can place them around the map, and if she dies, her teammates can still get heals off of them. So for all of those reasons, I'm going to be putting Doc in C tier. Now following up Doc, we have Echo, who's also going to be going in the B tier next to Clash. Echo, in my opinion, is just kind of a mid-tier operator. You can get decent amounts of utility out of his yokai drones if you support your roamers and your teammates and stuff. However, the problem with yokai drones is that they're extremely visible and loud, which means the attackers can very easily counter them if they're paying attention. And one of the most overpowered operators in the game, Dokubi right now, just hard counters Echo in pretty much every way. I do like the fact that he has the MP5 SD, which is a strong weapon, and he has a deployable shield. However, I don't think I can justify putting him in A tier because by definition, he's not good in every round. Following up Echo, we have Ella, who's going to be going in the C tier, and I think most people will not be surprised by that. Her traps are not very good, and the only reason why people pick her is because she has a decently fun to use SMG, and she's a 3-speed. She does bring a deployable shield, which is a nice plus, but she doesn't have a secondary shotgun, and her traps are not nearly as good as other trap operators. So in most situations, you'd be better off picking pretty much any other trap operator in Siege right now. And speaking of better trap operators, I think Fenrir is a clear candidate for that, and that's why he's going to be going in the A tier. Fenrir has access to a secondary shotgun, which allows him to set up the site for his team. He also has access to his F-Not mines, which in my opinion are way stronger than Ella's mines, and that's because they basically completely blind the enemy. This allows you to get a free kill on an attacker if they step into the mine and you're there to react to it. This is vastly different than Ella, where it's not really guaranteed that you're going to get a free kill off an Ella mine. Ella mines do produce a lot of noise, which can be useful for intel. However, Fenrir can see his traps through walls when they detonate, and so he gets way more information off of them. So as long as your Fenrir is communicating with your team, you'll be able to pinpoint where the attackers are pushing from, and you'll also likely get a lot more utility out of his traps. And another operator you'd likely get more utility out of is Frost, and she's going to be going in the B tier. Frost is just a solid operator. She has access to a deployable shield, secondary shotgun, her SMG is all right, and she also has her Frost match, which can be useful for stopping the attackers from pushing through windows, and they can especially counter shield operators. And that's because when a shield operator tries to vault a window now, they can no longer stay ADS'd. And so if a Frost mat is under a window, it basically just shuts that down altogether. And with shield operators being such a huge point in the meta, having a Frost can actually be pretty useful for countering those kind of strategies. Now following up Frost, we have Goyo, who's going to be going in the middle of A tier. Goyo is an operator that is extremely strong right now, and that's because he has access to the Vector with an ACOG, or if you don't like the Vector because you can't control the recoil, he has a TCSG with an ACOG as well. He has impacts, and he also has his Vulcan canisters, which he gets 4 of. These can waste a ton of time off the attackers if you place them in the proper locations, and when you have impacts and a great gun on top of that, I think you can see why I'm putting him in the A tier. As long as you build your strategy around Goyo and you're smart with your placements, you can get utility out of him on pretty much every bomb site. Now following up Goyo, we have another operator that you can get utility out of on every site, and that is Jager, and he's going to be going in the A tier as well. Jager is up here for obvious reasons. His ADSs are useful in every round because they stop projectiles, and he also has a bulletproof camera and a decent weapon. He's definitely not overpowered, but he's an operator that you will get utility out of if you pick him in every round. Following up Jager, we have Cade, who's going to be going in the top of A tier. He's borderline overpowered. However, I'm not going to be putting him in S tier. The reason why Cade is borderline overpowered is because he can electrify hatches, which pretty much no other operator can do, and he can also electrify 3 walls with 1 electric claw, meaning that in theory, he could electrify 6 walls on a bomb site. This is way more than what Bandit can do. The only real downside to Cade is that you can't really trick as easily with him because deploying his gadget takes a lot longer, but that downside is made up in the fact that he can cover so much ground. He also has access to the TCSG with an ACOG, and he has a nitro cell at his disposal, so in my opinion, he's basically just Bandit, but better. Now following up Cade, we have Kapkan, who's going to be going in the middle of B tier. Kapkan is the definition of a solid pick. His EDDs, while you're not guaranteed to get utility out of them, if you do, it can be massively detrimental for the attack because it can deal a lot of damage and potentially end up giving you a free kill. And he has access to the VSN SMG, which is really good. And he has access to impacts and barbed wire, which are both incredibly strong. You really can't go wrong with picking Kapkan. However, there are some better trap operators than him. Lesion is by far the strongest trap operator in the game, and he's going to be going in S tier for me. Lesion's goo mines provide so much intel to the team. He has access to a secondary shotgun, which helps him set up the site. He has a T5 SMG, the best SMG in the game, and he's a 2-speed. Literally, he has everything you could possibly want in a defender. Lesion is definitely an operator that Ubisoft should consider tweaking in the future just slightly to make him a little more balanced. And following up Lesion, we have Maestro, who's going to be going in the C tier, and he kind of needs to be tweaked for obvious reasons. I think Maestro has gotten way too weak over the years, and that is because he's countered by so many different gadgets. Explosives counter Maestro's Evil Eyes, melees counter Maestro's Evil Eyes, EMPs counter Maestro's Evil Eyes, and literally every attacker in the game has one of those 3 possibilities to counter Maestro. So not only does Maestro have to deal with a ton of counters, but he can also be thrown off of his gadget by a Dokkaebi call. And when Dokkaebi is one of the most oppressive operators on the attack right now, and she's getting picked a lot, Maestro being countered by that is a huge detriment. And so in my opinion, he belongs in C tier. But following up Maestro, we have Melusi, who's going to be going in the A tier. I think the only thing really holding Melusi back is the fact that she's so hard countered by Brava. She has 4 for Banshees, which can cover a wide range, give you a lot of intel, and really slow down the attack if you place them in the right spots. And she has access to a secondary shotgun to help set up the site. Her weapon might not be the greatest because it is an MP5 with a 1x sight, but I think the sheer amount of utility she brings makes up for that fact. And the only real way for the attackers to do large amounts of damage to Melusi's Banshee setup is to bring a Brava. Following up Melusi, we have Mira, who's going to be going in the B tier. Mira is an operator that is really solid if you have a setup around the Mira windows, and that's why she's going in B tier. She's not useful in every round or on every bomb site because there are sites where Mira windows are not that useful, and you also have to bring operators to support Mira. If you don't bring a Jager or Wamai when you're playing Mira, her Mira windows are going to end up getting shattered within the first minute of the round because the enemy team will most likely have an Ashe or a Kali to deal with it. And also, if you don't have some sort of mute jammers or Mozzie pests placed around Mira's windows, they could end up getting countered by a Twitch drone as well. So because Mira is so heavily countered by a lot of operators, and she's only really useful on specific sites, I had to put her in the B tier. That is not the case for Mozzie though, so he's going to be going in the middle of A tier. Mozzie is the definition of an operator that's just good in every round. You can place his pests around the bomb site, get utility out of it by denying drone work, and you can also set them up on a roam to deny drone work from the attackers as well and waste a lot of time. He also has pretty decent secondary gadgets, and his weapons are really fun to use as well, with him having the P10 Roni and the Commando. You really can go wrong picking Mozzie, and that's why he's in A tier. However, Mute, Mozzie's main competitor, is an absolute machine, and that's why he's going in the top of A tier. Mute can deny drone work from the attackers, he can counter Deimos and Dokkaebi, 2 of the most oppressive operators in the game, and he has access to a shotgun SMG-11 combo, which allows him to set up the site and be a menace in close range, and he has a nitro cell. He literally has everything you could possibly want in an operator. The only reason why I'm not putting Mute in S tier is because I don't think he has enough to justify him getting nerfed. However, I do think he's one of the best operators in the game. Following up Mute, we have Oryx, who's going to be going in the top of C tier. Oryx is pretty much only useful if you're playing on a really vertical map like Cafe, where there's a lot of hatches for him to jump up and flank the attackers with, or if the enemy team is bringing shield operators, because you can hide in corners and catch attackers off guard and ram into their shield operator and get a free kill. But those situations are few and far between, and if you're not picking him in those use cases, you'd be better off picking pretty much any operator above the C tier. And even for countering shield operators, there are better operators on this list for doing that, like Lesion. And now following up Oryx, we have even more of a bad operator, and that is Pulse, who's going to be going in the top of D tier. I think Pulse has been in need of a rework for a while. His gadget is extremely niche at best because you have to play under a soft surface to be able to get utility out of it, because you're going to be able to nitro attackers through the floor. And his primary weapon is the same as his other FBI defender counterpart, Castle, which means he has the UMP. And that weapon, while it is decent on Castle because it has an ACOG, and also Castle has more utility than Pulse, it's not very good on Pulse because he doesn't get an ACOG, and Pulse's utility doesn't really make up for the fact that he has a UMP. I think Pulse's gadget is way too slow, clunky, and outdated to really be useful in the current meta, and that's why I'm putting him here. He definitely needs to be looked at by Ubisoft and potentially given some buffs. And another operator that needs to be looked at by Ubisoft and get some buffs is Rook, and that's why he's going to be going in the C tier as well, kind of behind his Doc counterpart. Rook, in my opinion, is a very weak operator for obvious reasons. If the enemy team just headshots you, you don't get any utility out of your Rook armor. And even if they do shoot you and down you while you have Rook armor on, the chance of you being able to self-revive off of your Rook armor is very slim, because you have to die right next to cover and be able to crawl behind cover before the attackers can kill you. And that situation very rarely plays out. When it does, it can be exceptionally strong. However, in most situations, Rook armor is not going to allow you to pull that off. And so that's why he's going to be going in the C tier. There's just too much risk involved with his gadget, and there's not much reward. Following up Rook, we have Sentry, who's going to be going in the bottom of B tier. I think Sentry is a decent operator if you notice that you have major holes in your secondary gadget lineup. Like if all the operators you're picking for your setup don't have barbed wire or deployable shield, then you could pick Sentry to solve that problem. However, you'd most likely be better off just picking operators that have those secondary gadgets already built in, because then you're most likely getting better gadgets and better weapons. Sentry does have a secondary shotgun, which does help them out out a ton. However, I think in most situations, you'd be better off just picking actual operators that have the secondary gadgets Sentry has, and then picking Sentry just to get secondary gadgets. Following up Sentry, we have Skopos, who's going to be going in the middle of B tier. I think Skopos is a really good operator if you know how to use her, and you also position her robots in the right spots. If you play off the bomb site in a really hard to clear out location, and you force the attackers to get as close as possible to you before you teleport away, you're going to get a ton of utility out of Skopos because you're going to waste a ton of time, and the enemy team is going to get nothing out of it because they're not going to be able to kill you. So for example, if you roam on Strip Club on Clubhouse, you shoot at the attackers, you make them notice that you're there, and then you force them to actually push you and clear you out, and then at the last possible second you teleport away, you're going to get a ton of utility out of that. However, if you play Skopos like most ranked players play her, by just setting up a robot somewhere randomly on the map and then just teleporting to flank the attackers later on in the round, it's not going to give you nearly as much utility as the previous example would. So I think Skopos' utility widely depends on how you play her. Skopos does have some major downsides, and that is the fact that she's really loud when moving around the map, and her primary weapon statistically is one of the worst on the defensive side. I do think Skopos is decent though if you have a proper roam strategy around her. However, her gadget is selfish, and you'd probably be better off picking other operators with actual utility and then just roaming with them. Now following up Skopos, we have Smoke, who's going to be going in the top of A tier next to Mute as well. That's because he also has a shotgun SMG-11 combo, which allows him to set up the bomb site and be really good in close range gunfights. He has the smoke canisters, which wastes attackers' time a lot and can deny the plant late in the round. And he has access to decent secondary gadgets. You literally can't go wrong with Smoke. That cannot be said about Solis though, and that's why she's going to be going in the bottom of C tier. Solis is basically Pulse, but just slightly better. She can see electronics through walls, which is useful. However, she can't identify what kind of gadgets they are until she activates overclock, and she only has a limited amount of overclocks, and so it's hard for her to be able to relay information to the team. Also, Solis's secondary gadgets are terrible, and she also doesn't have very good guns as well because she only has access to the P90 and she has access to an SMG-11. Solis really got hit hard with nerfs by Ubisoft, and she just hasn't been the same since. Tachanka is just like Solis. He is extremely weak, and he's going to be going in the top of D tier for that reason. Tachanka has been weak for a very long time. His fireballs do not have very wide range, and they do not deal a lot of damage, so the attackers can just run through them. And that means that when you have your fireball launcher out, the attackers can just run through the fire and then shoot you while you have your fireball launcher out. There's very few strategies where Tachanka is actually useful, and in my opinion, he's in desperate need of a rework because most of the time you're just going to get yourself killed trying to use him. Thorn is in the same boat as Tachanka, and that's why she's going to be going in the top of D tier. Thorn's gadgets are just incredibly terrible. Her traps detonate way too slowly, so the attackers have plenty of time to get away from them, and they're also countered by a ton of operators. The only real upside to Thorn is the fact that her weapons are pretty decent, and she does have pretty solid secondary gadgets, but it's not really worth picking an operator just for secondary gadgets and a good gun when there's so many operators higher on this list that have good guns and great gadgets. Following up Thorn, we have Thunderbird, who's going to be going in the upper part of B tier. Thunderbird is an operator who has made a major comeback, and that's because her Kona stations no longer heal attackers, which is huge, meaning that she can place them on roams and not have to worry about the attackers actually getting utility out of her own gadget. And she has a secondary shotgun, which allows her to help her team set up the site. She has a deployable shield, and her guns are great. I kind of touched on this with Doc, but she is just way better than every other healing operator in the game, and that's why she's going in B tier. Healing operators are still pretty niche because if you get headshot, you're not going to get any utility out of their gadgets, but still, I think Thunderbird's worth going in the B tier. Following up Thunderbird, we have Valkyrie, who's going to be going in the middle part of A tier for obvious reasons. Having extra cameras on the defense is always important because it gives you way more intel, and getting a nitro cell on top of that to be able to use your cameras against the attack by killing them through the floor is huge. Only real downside is that she does have the MPX, which is kind of a crappy weapon. It does have low recoil, which allows you to easily headshot, but its DPS is not very good. She's still an amazing operator though, without having a good gun because of how much utility she brings to the team. Following up Valkyrie, we have Vigil, who's going to be going in the bottom of B tier. Vigil is a decent operator if you want to roam because you can deny the attacker's drone work. However, if the attackers are smart, they can basically pinpoint your location while your gadget is active by surrounding you with drones and just keep moving in until they see the alert on their drone get stronger and stronger. This can allow them to pinpoint your location and eventually kill you pretty easily if you're not paying too much attention. However, I think where Vigil shines is being able to activate his gadget, wait for drones to drive nearby him, and then just shoot them and run away. This can allow you to last a lot longer on a roam and can waste the enemy's intel gathering game. And Vigil also has access to really good guns and impacts. The only real downside to Vigil is that he doesn't bring actual utility to his team because his gadget is a selfish gadget. However, I think if you use it right and you roam properly with Vigil, you can get a lot of utility out of him. That's why I'm putting him in the B tier. Now, following up Vigil, we have Wamai, who's going to be going in the upper part of A tier. He's basically just better Jager. He has better guns, his magnets are better because he can capture more projectiles in a round, and he has access to better secondary gadgets and a pistol that can make head holes and footholes. You honestly should be picking Wamai every single round, and he's by far better than Jager. Jager. Now after Wamai, we have Warden, who's going to be going in the top of B tier. But Warden is still a very strong operator if you set him up in a power position and you have other operators around him to help support him. And that's because by him playing in a power position, he can't get flashbanged, he can't get smoked, and the attackers basically have to push him head on. And if he has the shotgun SMG-12 combo, they basically can't push him without risking death. And with shield operators also being super strong in this current meta, he's basically a hard counter to blitz, and he's an operator that a lot of attackers like to bring to push power positions and clear people out. But that won't work against Warden. So if you pick Warden, you set up his deployable shield in a power position, and then you have what my Magnus or Jaeger ADSs around him to protect his shield, you'll notice pretty quickly that he's exceptionally strong in those positions. And you'll be able to waste a lot more time off the attack than you would with other operators. However, if you're just picking Warden to run around with an MPX and kill people, you'd be better off picking a lot of other operators, and so that's why I'm putting him in the B tier. If you pick an actual lineup around him, he can be strong. However, if he's just on his own, he's not going to be nearly as useful. And finally, after Warden, we have Tuberau, who's going to be going in the S tier. I've been a big proponent of Tuberau being in the S tier for a very long time. When Tuberau can waste 30 seconds off the attacker's time for free, get access to one of the best DMRs in the game with an ACOG, and have access to a Nitro Cell, I think it's clear to see why I have him so high on this tier list. I definitely think Ubisoft should consider giving Tuberau some small tweaks, potentially nerfing some of the time on his canisters or removing his Nitro Cell, because being able to just waste time off the clock for free in Siege is actually massive. Anyways, that wraps up today's tier list. As always, these videos are strictly my opinion, and if you disagree, feel free to leave your opinions in the comments down below. If you enjoyed today's video, I make Siege content just like this once a week, so go subscribe to the channel and follow me on Twitter if you don't want to miss the next upload. And if you want to watch another video just like this one, a video will be popping up on your screen right now that I'm sure you'll enjoy. I'll see you next time, friends, and peace.